We got to start with Georgia, Auburn. Auburn, Georgia, let's say the visitor's name first, but yet, my goodness. Look, I have so much on this game. I also have a little Post-it here. And the Post-it comes from Jim in the email inbox about an hour ago. I'm going to read that in just a second. Georgia, 27. Auburn, 6. Just a true Sarah McLachlan special, as we used to call it back in my independent days. Those are those animal abuse commercials where there's soft Sarah McLachlan music in the background and you're looking at all these. It's a sad sight, but they're trying to get you to adopt the animals. Well, there was a Sarah McLachlan special last night in Athens, Georgia, and Auburn was the wounded animal. There's no other way to put it. So we pull no punches here. There are several different ways we could go on this, but I want you to, before you look at this game, go back with me to the Thursday show or the Tuesday show. I was trying to make some sense of Arkansas, Georgia, and I was trying to put it in a way where I was asking, would you feel nearly as nervous about Georgia if this happened? So what I came to was I said, let's keep everything about Georgia, Arkansas the same way. You saw from Stetson Bennett what you saw from him. You saw from Dwan Mathis what you saw from him. But let's just say we took the halves and we reversed them. So Stetson Bennett started that Arkansas game, did everything he did. Georgia got up big, and then Dwan Mathis came in and looked terrible. Would you feel a lot better? I thought the answer was yes. You probably would feel a lot better because you would have said, okay, our starter did what our starter should do, and that's who's going to be playing against Auburn, and so we'll be fine. We just need to get Mathis some work down the road. Well, Stetson Bennett started against Auburn, and boy, did the start of this game look a whole lot different than the start of the Arkansas game. Now, it's a funny thing that there's a difference in our core audience, like the folks listening to the show right now or watching the show right now versus kind of the drive-by Saturday crowd, which is all about like snapshots and sound bites, and they don't really watch the whole video, so therefore half the time they think you predicted something other than what you actually predicted. So I had a lot of people popping in last night for some reason thinking I predicted Arkansas or Auburn to win the game, which we did not. We predicted Georgia to win the game. We did think it would be a little bit tighter than it was. But some very obvious things to me in this game last night. So let's just dive into it together. I'm sure that you guys have a lot of opinions on this. I'm just going to tell you what I watched. I sat right over here across the way and I watched it in our studio here. Auburn probably in this game appeared to be more physically outmatched than any big game or game period that I remember watching them in since Gus Malzahn got there. And they've played some good teams. They've played some loaded teams. I don't ever remember it looking like a car wreck every 40 or 45 seconds like it did last night. Kirby Smart handled the quarterback situation exactly as we expected him to. There was a lot of bluster early in the week. Oh my goodness, JT Daniels has been cleared. We did not expect him to be a factor in this game. We did not, for that matter, expect Dwan Mathis to be much of a factor in the game. We expected Stetson Bennett to start, and we listed the reasons why. And I don't really think that was kind of running circles around anyone else intellectually. I think most people around Georgia understood that's the way it was going to go. So he handled it the way we thought he would. But here's what at least I didn't think we'd see. I did not think we'd see Georgia have an edge at quarterback in this game, and we did. And I'm going to get back to that in just a second because it is a problem. It's a really good thing for Georgia. It is a problem for Auburn that extends far beyond just, well, Bo Nix faced a really tough defense last night. This isn't a Georgia thing. This is an Auburn thing. So I'm going to talk about that in greater detail in just a second. This defense is on a different level for Georgia now. This defense is on a different level than one that you've seen for Georgia. But I'll be honest, it's still early in the season, so let me hesitate and let me just throw this out there. It may be that you're looking at one of the best defenses in modern college football. That's a mouthful, but the reason I say it is this. I want you to think about a player. And it's not a guy who's a household name. His name is Adam Anderson. Adam Anderson's a former five-star outside linebacker, edge rusher type, and he's not a guy that you would consider a starter. He's not a guy who plays 60 or 65 snaps a game, but he's a perfect representation of what Kirby Smart's built and the defense that they've built there. When you go through the schedule that you're going to go through in the SEC, you got to face a team like this week in Tennessee, which is content to run the ball at like a 90-10 ratio and just pound on you all day. But then you're also going to face a team like Alabama or like Florida who could slice you up through the air, and you got to be able to affect the quarterback. And the point is, most teams have to settle for building their defense in one kind of way. Georgia has built their defense where they have so many sub-packages and so many personnel options that they're able to defend everything. They're able to put a product on the field defensively where one guy may play 35 snaps one week and you don't even see him the next 2 weeks. That's the kind of defense they had in Smart's latter years at Alabama, and that's the kind of defense that he's finally built there. They are so versatile. They have so many different weapons, and some of them you don't even know the names of, and it's just There are specialty situations where maybe, well, that's their week to shine. Adam Anderson had, I think, the best game he's had at Georgia so far last night. They are able to morph Power Ranger style. Targeting rules are not good in this game. Targeting rules are not good in this sport right now. They updated them. It's time to overhaul them again because the spirit of that rule does not allow for the game to be played, in some cases, the way it is supposed to be played. There is no one who's a bigger proponent of player safety than I am. But you had two premier safeties in this game last night, ejected in the first half, who had no business being ejected from the football game. We'll probably talk about that more this week. As much as we talked about the Auburn offensive line, we had an equal focus on the Georgia offensive line, the run game in general, because that was what was so alarming to us is the run game in week one sputtered to the tune of less than 3 yards per carry, and they shined last night. There was no unit I saw across college football yesterday that validated themselves better than the Georgia offensive line and the running back stable there. So just the Georgia run game in general. And they didn't have a quarterback back there, the likes of, Joe Burrow, where the defense is constantly worried about him. Everyone knew what Georgia was going to do. And, hey, they still couldn't stop it. So, like I said, it was a car crash every 40 seconds. If you go back and watch the replay, I watched – who was it? It was Brigham Young versus Navy a couple of weeks ago when Navy had not tackled at all in practice, and so BYU faced them. I've never seen domination at the line of scrimmage like that in major college football. And I'm not going to say last night was quite to that degree, but it was rough. It was one of those situations where sometimes you watch a team get an early lead and you say, all right, well, things will balance out. But when they're getting an early lead by just picking you up and then placing you 3 yards behind where you started, you're not fixing that. What was Auburn going to do? They're not fixing that. So for all the heat that we thought Kirby Smart may face if he allowed Auburn to come in there and lose, which he would have, I don't think anyone spent a whole lot of time talking about what it would be like for Gus Malzahn, mainly because I think most people expected a close game either way, and I'll be honest, I was among those people. I got to give it a hat tip to Rusty Menzel. Rusty called 20-6 on this game, I believe. 27-6 was the final. I talked to him early in the week. He was adamant, man. He was adamant about a few things. I saw he shared his thoughts over on Dogs 24/7 earlier today. That guy, at least for this week, very prophetic, because it's almost like he has sources inside the program, because everything he said would happen, happened. So for all the heat, like I was saying, that Kirby Smart was going to take and everyone thought this and that, say this out loud with me. Think about this. Think about the fact that Auburn hasn't won in Athens since, as they say, Moses was in short pants, and they still haven't. And I want you to think, if you're not an Auburn fan, just kind of put yourself in their shoes for a second. I want you to start saying this out loud. They have not gotten it done up there, obviously. This was a year where, since it's COVID, you don't have the true home field advantage that you normally would. Also, Georgia is using not their first, second, or third, but a guy who was running fourth string at quarterback as recently as a month and a half ago, and you've got a returning starter in Bo Nix. You have things in front of you. Everything's laid out, and you still go in there, and you don't get beat. You get embarrassed. You get dismantled. That's far more demoralizing than going back and forth, and Georgia kicks a game-winning field goal. They win 26-24 as time expires. If you watched that last night, even though the opening or closing line for this game was around a touchdown, you got the sense that 10 times out of 10, if they played that game, it ends the same way or maybe even worse for Georgia. And so that takes me back to what I said last night. I don't do a whole lot of the hot take stuff, and I don't even figure what I'm about to say to be a hot take. I just thought it was reality. I did not expect, like I told you, Georgia to have an edge at quarterback, but they did. It's not apples to apples. I know Bo Nix had to face a defense, the likes of which Stetson Bennett didn't have to face, but here's the point. I said last night, I think Stetson Bennett is a better quarterback than Bo Nix is right now. So a lot of people took that to mean I thought he had better tools than Bo Nix, and a lot of people took it to me, Stetson Bennett doesn't have to play Georgia's defense. I took all that into consideration. What I'm going to ask you simply is this. I got some names here I wrote down. So our buddies, College Football Nerds, tweeted this out earlier today, and it was a list of names. And this is a very, very tired point, but we got to keep making it for Auburn. Zeke Pike, Jeremy Johnson, Sean White, now Bo Nix. The next quarterback that this program recruits and develops in-house at a successful rate will be the first under Gus Malzahn. Still haven't done it. So you're watching the game last night, and you're watching Bo Nix, and Bo Nix exists within the Auburn offense. Stetson Bennett exists within the Georgia offense. Which guy looked more poised, but also which guy operated with more a sense of himself being a part of an offense, playing a specific role in an offense? In other words, I'm asking you, which one looked like they had an established identity? And the answer is not the guy who's a returning quarterback in an offense that has a lot of carryover. The answer is the dude who they told a month ago they didn't really think they had a spot for at quarterback. I don't know if you watched the broadcast last night, but Chris Fowler threw that little tidbit in there. Todd Monken and company told him, we don't really think you're a quarterback here. And a month later, he's operating just fine. That's an offense. That's what that's called. That's called a system. It's called an offense. They hadn't had it very long at Georgia. It's a new system. And yet they already have it established much better than Auburn did. And if you're going to look at me and you're going to say, oh, well, Auburn's got an offense, but it's just Georgia. No one's going to score much on that defense of Georgia's. You're right. They didn't play Georgia last week, did they? They're not going to play them this week. Why do I get the sneaking suspicion in the back of my mind that they're going to look pretty discombobulated again this Saturday? And they're going to play Arkansas. They're favored by 17 points. But yet, why do I get the feeling we're going to come out of this Saturday, just like you did coming out of the Kentucky game, and you're going to say, I still don't really know discernibly what the identity of this team is. That's a big problem. That's a big problem moving forward. So what do you think about Stetson Bennett now? If I was asked that one time, I was asked that 500 times last night. What do I think about Stetson Bennett? And I've come to the conclusion, I can come to no other conclusion. I simply believe a lot of people either heard through word of mouth what was said on this show last week, and they heard an erroneous version of it, or you just didn't watch the whole show, or you just watched little bits and pieces. Or you would think that I trashed this kid, and I didn't. So let me one more time clearly state, because the answer is my opinion is unchanged. I think the same thing about Stetson Bennett today as I did Thursday afternoon. So I can be very happy for him, and I am. I'm ecstatic for him. It was ultra impressive what he did last night. Poise and accuracy are very important things, and he possessed both of them in his first career start. And that's not a small deal. That's a really big deal, because as down defensively as Auburn may be, they're still a pretty good defense. So don't get me wrong on that. It's a great story. He managed the game excellent. He did everything that they would ask him to do. The point I've made, and I will continue to make, and I think Kirby Smart in his post-game remarks kind of intimated the same thing, is there is going to come a time where you have to score to win. Last night, they were in a situation where they didn't have to. There will come a time where you have to score to win. My only point is, I do not think the ceiling on this team is an SEC championship ceiling with Stetson Bennett being your permanent quarterback. That's the only point I've made. I will continue to believe that. Nothing about last night changed that, because you didn't play for an SEC title last night. So you can be in a really good spot now, and yet me still believe that. And I do believe it. And ultimately, and as good as things looked last night, I think Kirby Smart, in not so many words, is suggesting the same thing. Ultimately, JT Daniels is going to be the guy, if Georgia is to win an SEC championship, that does it for this team this year. Stetson Bennett is playing a role right now, and it's as crucial a role to keeping things steady for the time being as JT Daniels will be eventually if and when he takes over. Because if you lost games right now, it wouldn't really matter down the road, would it? So it's really admirable what he did last night. I'm just saying, my opinion, it's not like my opinion changed all of a sudden last night. Arkansas at Auburn this Saturday. Auburn opens as about a 16.5 to 17-point favorite. Tennessee at Georgia. Georgia opens. If you hadn't seen the line, guess along with me. What would Georgia be over Tennessee? 14 points. That's the spread. And before we move on, because Jim took the time to email me, I want to read this little stat Jim sent me in the email inbox. He said, a lot of people have been talking about Auburn upsetting us. A lot of people are talking about Florida upsetting us. Let me tell you why we, as Georgia fans, are not all that concerned. Through 12 games, this is impressive, and I did not go fact check this, so I just trust Jim. Through 12 games, Kirby Smart, as either a head coach or a DC, facing Gus Malzahn as either a coordinator or head coach, Gus Malzahn is averaging 19.8 points per game, and that includes a 44 spot that they hung in 2014. Kirby Smart versus Dan Mullen. They faced each other 14 times. That's like a couple of careers for most people. Dan Mullen, 13 points per game. And that is why Jim says Georgia is not too concerned about either one. Well, obviously they disposed of the first part of that equation. You got Florida coming up down the road a little ways.